Good morning and welcome to the August 16th, 2017 Board of County Commissioners meeting. I'm Kate Flavin, Public Information Officer for Sedgwick County. Commissioners, we have a very busy agenda this morning with many items for the Metropolitan Area Metropolitan Area Building and Construction Department, along with a report of our quarterly finances. I'm sure you're well aware that we have an eclipse coming up on Monday. The Lake Afton Public Observatory is hosting a how-to session on Saturday for how to properly view the eclipse safely to protect your eyes. And that event will be held from 1 to 3 o'clock at the observatory at Lake Afton. And Exploration Place is having an eclipse party Monday from 11:30 to 3 p.m. There will be food trucks and fun activities, and more information can be found on their website at www.exploration.org. And one final announcement and reminder, Zubilee will be here before we know it. So the tickets for the fundraiser are available now for $135. The cost for the ticket does go up to $150 on September 1st. So be sure to check out information on the zoo's website, and to purchase a ticket, their website is www.scz.org. And with that, Chairman, I will let you start the meeting.
All right, Kate, thank you for that introduction, and I might add that you can also get Zubilee tickets from zoo board members if you happen to know one, and Commissioner Dennis happens to be on the zoo board, and he has an allotment of tickets to sell. So, but anyway, thank you for those comments, Kate, and we'd like to welcome everyone to our meeting today, those who are here in person and those who are watching by way of television. And with that, I would call to order the regular meeting of the Board of County Commissioners, August 16th, 2017. Madam Clerk, first item.
Invocation, to be observed by a moment of silence. Please remain standing for the flag salute.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam Clerk, next item.
Roll call. Commissioner Dennis.
Present.
Commissioner Ranzaw. Commissioner Howell.
Present.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Present.
Chairman Unruh.
Present. And next item.
Public agenda.
Thank you. We have two folks who have signed up to speak this morning to us. So first is Diana Greenwood. If you'd want to step to the podium, and you have 5 minutes to make your remarks.
Well, first of all, the constitutional rights says it all. And we will never fight brother against brother ever again. So the war has been won. So now it's been individual battles. The Marine Corps that go into the field, death before dishonor, for we do not take a life, we do not judge, we bring them all home because they have someone to go home to. We bring the leaders to a clean table to speak truth of the word to help all, not just a few. My dad, A.H. Greenwood, Navy, teacher for teachers of new radio technology 3 times around the world, early 60s. Set up communications with a few upstanding countrymen with Washington, D.C. So when communications went down, they stayed up. Worked well so far. We want nothing to do with the race of technology. We have the clean technology. Y'all can keep yours. My dad, when I was 5, was stationed here. We're from family of farmers. Surprise, you're surrounded by farmers. Isn't that so cool? The wheat fields of Kansas, my great-grandpa Lemming. I am the sunflower child. I am his favorite great-granddaughter. With all of them. He's very native. his daughter married my grandpa Isaac. World War II, Purple Heart, 16 years old when he went. Tall Navy, big shoulders. Thin, he's a runner, runs with the horses, and he can clear a valley. For we know how to walk in Daniel's den with the fiery lines of Judea, so they may all come home. Now, since we're not at war with anybody, in particular, it's individual battles, and they tend to clump together to be the strong house, to rule America, to rule the world. Gee, we're at 21st century. Clean water is important. We are not homeless. We're out on the street keeping the peace the best we can. We have the most beautiful cathedral sky with the earth, and down there is paradise. That's called Clean Water Act and clean soil. Now, where have you all missed the mark while you keep on building and digging in land that is not yours? Nobody has a right to my entitlement of my heritage, just as I do not want yours. But I am who I am. I am my father's firstborn, and I'm a Navy brat, and I am not a brat. Now, he went to work for Cessna. When we was stationed here, they knew of his intelligence, but not of his clearance. My dad is known by a few upstanding countrymen around the world. The Greenwood name, very few people can legally hold that name with the name Hilton. Do not confuse the Lady Hilton with my father's name. We don't put her in jail or anybody else. We don't believe in jail. But somebody was trying to recycle people in this country for a paycheck. Get real. We have better things to do than be tested on by psychotropic, mind-altering, controlling tranquilizers with subliminal messages. When they set up communications that was put on the books, they were allowed to adopt it from Washington, D.C., all states, and countrymen around the world. No one is to misuse new technology in radios or TVs. All the documents are in. The innocent have been cleared, and those that took a stand and said, I'm innocent, and spent their time and was released, they're getting the papers. They were innocent in the first place. I love them people. They brought calmness and peace to the prisons. We take a stand in our country, supporting it wherever we are. And the homeless out on the street, not all of them are homeless. When you imbalance the budget to go in your favor, somebody's going to get kicked off the board and out of their home. That isn't cool. You guys can balance your, I have a solid 401k. Greenwood Estate is my family.
Ms.
I'm the
Greenwood?
fourth generation on my father's side. On my mother's side, it's the Tomb tribe. Isaac, first to be numbered in this country because he wanted to go and help support this family. 12 chiefs of Oklahoma. He is one that sits on board, and also with the good president's standing, we support them. Thank you very much, and think about what you do before you try to take somebody's land you have no right to. Like 520 my father's house. It is a living estate. I haven't even had time to file any paperwork before, whoa, all the paperwork comes in to see what they can take out of the water that is not theirs, rightfully not theirs to take. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for your comments. We have also signed up to speak David Molahan. Now, you want to speak on one of the agenda items, is that correct? Would you rather speak now or wait till item's called and we've had our discussion? All right, thank you. Well, if you'd step to the podium and state your name, and you have also 5 minutes.
My name is David Mulhagen, and this is in reference to 17630. And I did talk with several people this morning, and the items that I had read through last night or yesterday have been addressed. And my apologies to them because I did not read through the red line until this week, even though I was sent it several months ago. So those items that I did express yesterday have been addressed.
Okay, very good.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for your comments. Appreciate you making the effort to be here. Is there anyone else from the public wishing to speak who did not sign up? That being the case, then Madam Clerk, please call the next item.
Consideration of minutes. Item A, special meeting minutes of June 28, 2017.
Commissioners, you've had the opportunity to review those minutes. Are there any additions or corrections?
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve the minutes to June 28th, July 12th, July 19th, and July 31st, 2017.
Second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Madam Clerk, call the vote.
Commissioner Dennis?
Aye.
Commissioner Ranzau? Commissioner Howell?
Aye.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
Aye.
Chairman Unruh.
Aye. Next item.
Appointments. Item E, resolution appointing Bernard J. Patrick to the Metropolitan Area Building and Construction Department, Board of Appeals of Plumbers and Gas Fitters.
Mr. Chairman, Eric Yost, County Councilor. This item E is a resolution appointing Mr. Bernard Patrick to the MABCD's Board of Appeals of Plumbers and Pipe Fitters in the mechanical engineer position. This position had been held by Mr. Keith Brewer, whose term expired on June 30th of this year. Mr. Patrick's term would expire July 31st of 2019. I understand Mr. Patrick is present to be sworn, or at least I've had that indication, and the paperwork appears to be in order, and I would urge adoption of the resolution.
All right, thank you. Commissioners, Commissioner Howell?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to make the motion that we would adopt the resolution making the appointment for Bernard Patrick to this board.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, call the vote.
Commissioner Dennis?
Aye.
Commissioner Howell?
Aye.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
Aye.
Chairman Unruh.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, apparently Mr. Patrick not able to be here this morning, but he'll be sworn in another time.
Okay, thank you. That being the case, we'll call the next item.
New business. Item F, resolution authorizing the establishment of a pedestrian crosswalk signal on MacArthur Road approximately 650 feet west of Oliver.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, David Spears, Assistant County Manager for Public Works. Spirit Aero Systems has contacted the county to explore options to enhance pedestrian safety at a crosswalk located on MacArthur, approximately 650 feet west of Oliver. The crosswalk at this location serves employees who park south of MacArthur but need to enter the plant at a security gate north of MacArthur. Over the course of approximately 9 months, several strategies were discussed. They included vacation and closure of MacArthur, where Spirit owns both sides of the road, installation of a signalized crosswalk, or construction of an overhead walkway. The benefits and drawbacks of each of these options have been fully discussed with Spirit Aero Systems, and they have in turn discussed them with the local machinist union. Our staff has studied the signalized crosswalk and noted that while it is a good way to protect pedestrians from through traffic on MacArthur, it will create the following traffic conflicts. Repeated use of the signal will back traffic up into Oliver to the east and into existing crosswalks to the west. Vehicular traffic exiting the north and south employed lots may not be able to see if the signal is activated and create conflicts with pedestrian in the crosswalk. This is specifically addressed in the MUTCD, that's a Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices, section 4F.02. Due to the potential for these negative traffic impacts, Public Works does not recommend the signalized crosswalk at this location. Additional measures would be needed to make a signalized crosswalk work properly. They include relocation of the crosswalk and or relocation of driveways, construction of an additional lane on MacArthur for vehicle storage while the signal is operational, and synchronization of the new signal with the other pedestrian and cart crossing signals on MacArthur. Pedestrian safety is an important issue. We've been working with the problem at this location for some time and have reached somewhat of an impasse on what action to take. We don't recommend this solution, but it's important that we present the information to you so that you can evaluate the situation and hear from affected parties. Spirit has indicated a preference for a hawk signal at this location. We have prepared a resolution for your consideration that would authorize the signal as they have requested it. I'll be happy to try to answer any questions that you may have on this issue.
All right, thank you, Mr. Spears. Commissioners, or any comment? Commissioner Howell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I probably have a number of comments and some questions for Mr. Spears, but if it's okay, if there's anybody in the audience that would like to speak on this, I'd like to hear from them first, if that's acceptable, and get my comments in once I get to hear what they have to say.
I think there are representatives here from Spirit, but I believe that they're ready to just listen to our discussion.
All right, very good. With that, I'd like to just ask a couple of questions. And Director Spears, thanks for the presentation. Do you know how long that crosswalk has been on MacArthur that we're talking about? There's already a crosswalk there. How long has that been there, do you know?
No, I do not know exactly, but it's been there since, no, I do not know. It's been there a long time.
Yeah, I say a long time. I drive up and down Oliver frequently, and I actually worked at the Boyne property for 11 years, and so I'm very familiar with this particular crosswalk, and as far as I can remember, it's been there since my earliest memory, so I don't know when it was placed there, but it's been a long, long time, decades, I would say. I hear what you're saying about you not recommending this, but I guess my position would be that I think this is a step in the right direction. This would be better than status quo. In my opinion, the issue of vacation is very problematic for a lot of reasons. By my understanding, there's about 10,000 cars that travel up and down MacArthur each day. Most of them are, if not 100% of them, but most of them are traveling to Spirit. A lot of them are employees. Some of them are trying to get to the stretch of MacArthur between Oliver and K-15, but a lot of them actually just go down MacArthur and turn in and park up and down Oliver Street, and they're coming from Wichita. They come off of 235 and travel down MacArthur. And so if this was to be vacated, we're talking about transferring all of those cars, for almost probably the vast majority of those cars may be transferred over to K-15 and have to travel around on 47th Street or 31st Street, which would add more pressure there. I think that there's a lot of issues why I don't think that's a good plan. We're talking about I don't know how many employees that park on the south side of MacArthur that actually walk to the north side, but if I understand correctly, these are all everybody who parks on the south side and goes to the north side. That's basically employees. We're not talking we're not talking about huge numbers of employees. We're talking about maybe a couple of hundred employees or so that park on the south side and go to the north side. And so to vacate that road would be a tremendous burden on other roads. And I think that status quo is not good enough. I think this hawk light's a step in the right direction. So I think it's arguable. I will make the argument that it's going to be safer to have the light than not have the light. And vacation to me is not an option. I just can't support that. And to do a bridge over the road or a tunnel under the road, there's lots of utilities in the way. And over the road is pretty expensive. It's a very expensive option. And again, for a couple of hundred employees, it's hard to justify $1 million or maybe $2 million expense. So I think that this is the way to go. And I would heartily support taking this action today to put this hawk light in on MacArthur Street. I think it's a step in the right direction. It provides more safety. Status quo is not good enough, and this is the best option I think on the table that we've discussed. Again, I've been working on this for many months, and I'm content to say this is the best option for the situation. So with that, Mr. Chairman, if there's no other comments, I will make a motion. We would take that we would approve the resolution establishing the pedestrian crosswalk signal on MacArthur Road as described in the presentation.
All right, thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion of commissioners? Is there anyone from the public with us who would like to speak to this before we vote? Okay, then I would just say that I can't remember a time in my nearly 15 years as a commissioner that I've gone against the recommendation of our professional staff. I fully respect and honor their judgment and their expertise. And so with that, Mr. Spears, I would still say that I'm going to support the motion. I know that the folks at Spirit have been well advised of your concerns, and they've taken that into consideration in their evaluation and their judgment, and they're still requesting this solution. So in deference to that, I'm going to also support the motion. Commissioner Dennis?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just briefly, and I believe I'll support the motion, but I want to make sure that I talk to legal first. Is there any, if we go against what Public Works recommends, is there any legal problems that the county may incur in the future if someone gets hit at this location or something else happens?
This Eric Yost, County Councilor, Commissioner Dennis, not because you had gone against the recommendation of staff. The only legal issue that could be raised in some subsequent lawsuit for damages if something happens would be that we did not follow maybe some standards that some people think we ought to. It would be a factor to consider in the lawsuit. But the fact that you went against the recommendation of staff, I don't think in and of itself constitutes any sort of or creates any kind of liability on our part.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. I see no one else requesting to speak, so Madam Clerk, please call a vote.
Commissioner Dennis.
Aye.
Commissioner Howell.
Aye.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Aye.
Chairman Unruh.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, David. Next item.
Item G, public hearing for the proposed adoption of the Safety Code for Elevators and Escalators, 2016 edition, the Safety Standard for Platform Lifts and Stairway Chair Lifts, 2014 edition, and the Safety Code for Existing Elevators and Escalators, 2015 edition.
Commissioner Unruh and Commissioners, good morning and thank you. Chris Labram, Director of the Metropolitan Area Building and Construction Department. As stated, public hearing and request for adoption of elevator safety codes as listed. These do incorporate both elevator and conveyance codes. We normally refer to them as elevator codes, but we want to emphasize that that's elevators, escalators, and ADA accessible lifts. This also includes Sedgwick County implementation of the codes, as we'll see in the presentation. The current code adoption or current code that MABCD is working from is 2004. This is robustly managed for City of Wichita conveyances. We inspect approximately 1,500, slightly over 1,500 of those. There are 104 conveyances that we are aware of in Sedgwick County. We currently do not inspect those. This adoption, as stated, would include the 2016 Safety Code for the elevators and escalators, the 2014 Safety Standard for platform lifts and stairway lifts. Again, those would be ADA accessible lifts. We do not see many of those, but there is that possibility, especially in new construction. The 2015 Safety Code for existing elevators and escalators would allow us to bring them into our permitting and inspection process, and that actually has stipulations for that process of onboarding them, if you will, and most of those standards are 1986 standards, so it would not require them to necessarily get a new elevator or do anything extremely drastic in that update. With that, the resolution does include a 5-year implementation plan that our chief elevator and electrical inspector, Mr. Norick, has worked out with local elevator companies in several meetings. This would allow us to set a plan and bring those into compliance with current code if there were any safety issues found in initial inspections. Obviously, that includes some items would have to be corrected quickly within 60 to 90 days if they were urgent safety related. Others up through and to the 5 years. This incorporation includes the ability to have us permit and inspect, meaning that we would obviously permit all elevators that we are aware of, and any new construction with MABCD. We will allow the elevator companies, or the building companies, excuse me, to then have our inspectors perform those inspections. Our fees range from $100 to $250 depending on complexity. And of course we would take care of all that. It does still allow, since to the best of our knowledge, the conveyances in the county are still being inspected just by private certified elevator inspectors. This would still allow a company, if they so choose, to permit with us. That would include us validating the credentials of that certified elevator inspector. They would be able to continue to use them as their inspector and provide us that documentation. We would administrate that inspection then and validate it. Most civilian companies, from the information we have, are charging between $200 and $1,200 for the inspections they're performing, depending on complexity. So we do see this as providing a service to our local businesses that would potentially be quicker and cheaper than what they are receiving now, in addition to obviously providing for public safety. The remaining slides that we have are a quick overview of the short summary of amendments that we made. These were all designed to, as stated earlier, to assist elevator companies in bringing into compliance and to help avoid expenses and major repairs. This one states that if a company is to remove an elevator, they don't have to immediately take that completely out of the building. There is an option to lock it out and safe it, until which point they would want to remove it, if ever. In the inspections prior to use, or if we do have an elevator that's been tagged out, again, we do not have a hard line for the elevator not to be used until all of those code items are taken care of. We allow them to work out a plan under that 5-year stipulation with our inspectors and proceed according to that. One item of a controller, actually our current code, the 2004 code, still states that if you were to change out your controller, you would have to bring the elevator up to compliance. Not in all cases is that required. This allows us now to change the controller and any critical or directly affected components without an entire modernization program. And then modern equipment. Older elevator code does not allow really anything in the elevator shaft. Modern equipment actually places a lot of that equipment in the shaft, so this would allow us to have smoke detectors in the actual elevator way there. The last one, for some reason, the code previous code states that you have to have a colored drum in the sump pit of that, and we actually prefer a clear drum so that inspectors or maintenance personnel do not have to enter that pit in order to see the level of the fluid. This would provide them a level of sight gauge and an added measure of safety, again minimizing how many times they would have to get in the pit. And that concludes my presentation on the code. Sir, I will stand for questions.
All right, Chris, thank you. Commissioners, are there any questions? I would ask if there's anyone who has knowledge of these issues who wants to speak. Anybody from the public? I don't see anyone. So, Commissioners, what's the will of the board?
I move that we approve the resolution.
All right, thank you. I'm looking at my, thank you for the motion, Commissioner, but I'm looking at my book, and I guess we have to open a public hearing. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
All right, pardon me for that oversight. So we'll hold the motion for just a moment.
Sure.
And then we will officially open a public hearing for any comment. I don't see anyone rising to speak. Would you like to make a comment? Please step to the podium and say your name.
I'm Cole Hawkins, work for an elevator company here in town, and I think the majority of us, or all of us, feel like this is a great safety item to proceed with.
Okay, thank you for your comment. Anyone else? Seeing no one rise to speak, we will close the public hearing, and we do have a motion and a second, I believe.
No second.
A second motion.
We have a second, thank you. Is there any discussion on the motion and second? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, call the vote.
Commissioner Dennis?
Aye.
Commissioner Howell?
Aye.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
Aye.
Chairman Unruh.
Aye. Thank you, Chris. Next item.
Item H, resolution to repeal and replace the Sedgwick County sign code.
Thank you, Commissioners. Good morning again. Chris Labrum, MABCD. As stated, repeal and replace of our current sign code. The majority of this is based on a Supreme Court decision, specifically Reed versus the town of Gilbert, in which it was challenged that the size of a sign cannot be dictated by the content. For our purposes, code as it applies to content would be the organization, such as a religious or a charitable organization versus a business or an advertisement. So according to that Supreme Court decision, any actual language that was placed on a sign would be a zoning or separate ordinance, but the code cannot actually enforce that. So we originally adopted code in 2004 for signs in Sedgwick County. Again, it was zoning code prior to that, and the bulk of this resolution removes our content-based code, and it was fairly extensive. We actually did have a code that allowed a much larger sign for religious groups, for example, than for a business in the unincorporated areas. Additionally, addition to that removal, we went through and tried to clean up our language and better apply the understanding and application. One example of that is we have a 1 mile restriction for signs. It allows 5 signs in a 1 mile stretch. Signs cannot be closer than 500 feet apart. We had been asked several times what the interpretation of that 1 mile was, so we now define that as the section lines. We also, and this was based on questions from commissioners, we separated those lines between city and county, so that way one jurisdiction could not fill up their area with signs, so to speak, and create a situation where a county member could not put up signs because the city had already filled that 1 mile stretch. It also then lessened the restriction on putting up temporary and small outdoor signs. We have a slide demonstrating that later as well. And then I would like to thank Mr. Mulhagen for his catch there. We did have 2 typographical errors in the resolution that was released publicly, and I apologize for that. Our red line copy did have these in them, but somehow we did not type that into to the original resolution, and our legal counsel's corrected that for us at this point. And specifically, we increased the amount of time before an abandoned sign will be removed. That previously was 90 days, now it will be 180 days. What we omitted is that 180 days will begin after written notification is received by the owner of the sign. So we have corrected that in the resolution you'll sign. It also stated that we added a definition for off-site signs and corrected that from billboards, and we had not deleted the section that included billboards previously with off-site signs, so that the not has been added to that. Off-site signs do not include billboards. And ironically, my first example of the changes, amendments, and lessened restrictions is that very one, that billboards are no longer considered an off-site sign because they can be changed. The content of that sign can be changed without a permit or any inspection from MABCD. As stated earlier, temporary signs, these would be those on-site lightweight signs. Previously could be placed for a cumulative 12 days within a year and could not be up for more than 4 days. We have opened that consecutive days. We've opened that quite a bit, and now you are allowed to place a sign for 90 days total, no more than 30 days cumulative. And then the exemption for small outdoor signs, anything that does not exceed 6 square feet, as long as it does not encroach on any zoning type restrictions, does not require permitting or any look by the MABCD. And that concludes my presentation, and I will stand for questions.
All right, thank you. Commissioners, is there any comment? This item does not require a public hearing, but is there anyone who wishes in the public that wishes to speak on this item? All right, I see no one wants to speak, so Commissioners, what's the will of the board? Commissioner Howell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of questions. So this only applies in the unincorporated part of Sedgwick County? Every city has their own
Correct,
sign
sir.
code? Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
So sometimes we see like a large tract of land, let's say it's a some piece of land that's for sale, and there's a real estate sign that's fairly large, just say like a 4x8 sheet of plywood that's been turned into a sign or something like that, a large sign that may be there for years. Does that comply with this type of a code?
That would depend on size, sir, and our evaluation with that. Normally, those still are temporary signs.
But they're there
Mr.
for,
Kelly,
they may be there for years. I mean,
yeah,
they're not there
Mr.
for,
Dixon is here too, Kelly. If there's, if the sign meets the size restrictions and is reported to us, then we would contact the owner of that sign, the owner of the property, and just that we would either permit the sign or notify them that they have 180 days to leave the sign in place.
okay, so it may be a concern. That might need to actually, I guess, coordinate with your office to get permission.
Correct,
to
sir.
put that sign up
If the sign
permanently.
is larger than 6 square feet. Now, do note that in most cases, this only regulates county roads as well. So if that was a state highway or a state road that the sign's being placed on, we then would have state restrictions, and we'd have to work with them.
I understand that there are other jurisdictions, and it is a little bit confusing for people to know what kind of code applies to what kind of roadway or whatever. But to the extent that we have county roads that have these types of signs along the road there, right? And I think we've all seen them. Some of them are very large, trying to advertise for sale of property or whatever. Sometimes it's a development, and they're advertising for someone to consider purchasing a lot within a development. Those are the type of signs I've seen. I'm sure we've all seen that. I'm just curious how that would apply, how that would be impacted by this sign.
If I
code.
may, Kelly Dixon, Metropolitan Area Building. On page 10 in the code there, it talks about real estate signs, specifically exceeding 8 square feet. They would be a permitted sign, would require a permit.
Would require
They have a specific rate that they would pay for that sign. Once it's permitted, then it can stay indefinitely.
Okay. And of course, in your office keeps track of which signs are permitted and which ones are not, but the average person wouldn't have no way to know the difference, would they?
Correct.
Okay. All right. I would just say this has always been the code, but this is less restrictive. And
It
it's
is.
more generous, if you will. Even though that may seem a little bit problematic to me, it's still a step in the right direction. It's a little bit less restrictive, even though that still feels a little maybe overly regulated in some cases. I drive past these large areas, and I don't know that I have any problem with that type of signage. And so, just to make sure I understand real quickly, if it's greater than 6 square feet, then they have a time limit without a permit or without a license or whatever it is. And what would that limit be again?
If any real estate sign over the 6 square feet would require a permit, and it would not be tied to a time.
Oh, I see.
Once a sign is permitted, that's the last time we look at it.
But if it's considered a temporary sign?
If they buy a temporary sign permit, then it is limited to the number of days.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll have to continue thinking about that, but I've been thinking about this for a while. I keep thinking of more questions, and I appreciate your willingness to answer my questions.
No problem.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner. Are there any other comment or question? What's the will of the board?
Move to approve the resolution.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, call the vote.
Commissioner Dennis.
Aye.
Commissioner Howell.
Aye.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Aye.
Chairman Unruh.
Aye. And I think, Chris, you're still up. Madam Clerk, call the next item.
Item I, resolution to establish a location permit requirement in the unincorporated area of Sedgwick County.
And yes, thank you again, Chairman, Commissioners. Chris Labrum, MABCD. This time, resolution to establish a location permitting process in the unincorporated county through MABCD. And just to clarify, this is non-residential, so location permits for non-residential, non-commercial accessory structures is all that are impacted. So the adoption of the 2012 International Building Code, an amendment for Sedgwick County, means that no structures, again, no non-residential structures under 400 square feet require a building permit. Any structure receiving a building permit, there is a location and a siting permit that is associated with that. So in these cases where no permit is required, we're requesting that MABCD still be contacted. We're requesting a site plan or a location permit be issued before those structures are completed. This will be a no fee, no specific format, no on-site inspection is required. So that would mean members would email, mail, stop by the office, load to our website a plat drawing, whatever format would work for them, describing their property and where they would like to locate their structure. We would then use our records to evaluate that, contact them as required for details, and look to ensure that they are not encroaching on the areas of concern, which are specifically utility setbacks, or utility right-of-ways, easements, setbacks, and then also floodplains. So floodplain does become a big portion of this. We are, of course, looking at this as a protective measure for our property owners. If they are in the floodplain, they may be subject to damage, they may have insurance issues, or they may also face loss through some sort of enforcement action if we as the county or federal government, a FEMA type or flood management type agency was to come in and enforce some of those areas, and we could not demonstrate that we had permitted and built structures to the required code. Also, of course, looking to protect ourselves as the county and ensure that we comply with the federal programs as best that we can, and that we also prevent our citizens from being subject to potential federal involvement or federal enforcement of those. So again, we're looking to avoid structures in floodplains. If someone was to build in a floodplain, there are code stipulations and requirements that would allow them to build that building to spec. We would certainly help with those. Our main recommendation would be to move the structure out of that plane. As stated, we want to avoid utility easements, which of course could involve a utility company needing to and having the right to enforce removement of that structure. And we want, for the same reasons, to avoid setbacks. Again, there's no on-site inspection required, so we would deny the permit, request that they relocate and reapply for a permit, still at no fee. At a minimum, even without the inspection, if the citizen was to go on and build without our location permit/permission, they at least would have the information as to why we recommend that they don't do that. And if there was any further enforcement or any other action to take place, that would be on record. That concludes our briefing on that, and I'll stand for questions.
All right, thank you. Commissioners, are any questions? Commissioner Dennis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I did receive one email on this subject, and it was in opposition, but I don't know if they fully understood that there is no fee, there's no inspections. They can provide the information in any format that they want, and the fact that it's a protection for them. So I'm not sure that the person that wrote the email to me was fully aware of what the proposal was. At least I hope they weren't, because I see this as a protection against this, for the citizens, that they're not going to have to tear down a building that they built because they put it in a floodplain or over the top of an easement and so forth. So. For that reason, even though I have only received one, I did not receive anybody that was in favor of it, but I make a motion that we adopt the resolution.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. And I just want to emphasize the fact, Chris, that this is for buildings that are less than 400 square feet.
Correct, sir.
Above that, they do have to comply with the permitting process.
Correct, sir.
And 400 square feet is a 20 by 20 fair-sized building.
Yes, sir.
So there's a lot of freedom in their construction decisions. So, yeah.
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Howell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of quick questions. So, is there a minimum size that they would require someone to actually come and have this request for a free location permit?
No, sir. We have not set a minimum
size.
size. Any building, any structure, accessory structure that a person would plan to put on their property.
If it's not attached to the ground, like someone just places a shed in the back property, is that
a temporary structure or a temporary placement where it's easily moved would not be a problem. Right, sir, because they could move it at any time.
So that would not require,
And-
that would not even trigger this requirement because it's easily moved.
Correct.
So that's kind of the point there. And I know it's in the backup material here, but just for the listeners' perspective, or listeners' understanding, if there requires any type of other inspections, otherwise like electrical inspection, they wanted to add electrical or any other kind of mechanical inspection, that would also require that does require a building permit, and all the inspections would have to happen as normal.
Correct. That would require the associated permit.
Sure.
And Mr. Dixon is letting me know I may have that somewhat misinterpreted with a temporary building, and again, depending on the size.
Again, Kelly Dixon, Metropolitan Area Building. Floodplain requirements, as laid out in our floodplain management resolution and by federal law, requires that any structure in the floodplain has to, if it's there, it does not give a size minimum. Any structure has to meet the requirements. There is no temporary building defined in that code. If they place a structure like that in the floodplain, it would have to meet floodplain management requirements of anchoring. So the key there is to keep it from floating away and causing a problem downstream.
I understand that, and I think that certainly is well intentioned. I think of the extremes on the spectrum, just to kind of make a point here. If someone was to build a doghouse or a playhouse, very, very small structure. I don't know that they would feel the same way about that type of structure because it's extremely small. Maybe that's being silly in my comment here, but the reality is I think about something that's extremely small. We would probably treat that differently than we would something that's like a 10 by 10 shed, or something that's portable. It's moved in there.
So, I agree with that.
And they may not even realize they're in a floodplain, and to come out. Some people don't even know to ask the question if they don't plan any type of mechanical or electrical amenities in the structure. They may not even realize that the conversation needs to happen about whether or not this is in the floodplain. They may not know that.
That's exactly right. A lot of folks that are in the floodplain don't realize it.
And if that was to happen under this code, that would still be okay. We're hoping that they'll come and ask, provide a site plan. We're not restricting them. We're simply giving them some free advice, literally free advice.
Literally.
And encouraging them to make good decisions to not locate that in a place that may cause a problem in the floodplain. So, again, I think this is a good balance. I would classify this as a deregulation, more freedom, more allowance, if you will. But we're also trying to protect them with information and not even charge them for the information, and give them free advice that helps them not make bad decisions on where to place this. So I think this is really a nice balance between regulating, strictly and versus allowing someone to use their property freely. So I understand this already has a motion in a second. That's great. I'm very supportive of the resolution this morning, but I guess I would like to classify this as a step towards deregulation, but still trying to protect people in the floodplain and protect people who are going to be impacted by floodwaters.
That is our goal.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Commissioners, any other comment or question? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, call a vote.
Commissioner Dennis.
Aye.
Commissioner Howell.
Aye.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Aye.
Chairman Unruh.
Aye. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Next item, please.
Item J, amendment to the 2017 Capital Improvement Program for renovation of the former Murdock Tag Office for EMSS OMD.
Good morning, Chairman and Commissioners. I'm Tanya Cole, Director of Facilities Maintenance and Project Services. I am here today before you to request approval of a CIP amendment to renovate the former Murdock Tag Office at 200 West Murdock for the Office of the Medical Director. To give you a little bit of background on this location, we acquired the building in 1989, and tag office operations were in that facility from 1989 till they vacated June of 2016. At that time, we were asked to begin to look at suitable tenants for this building, and we did several program studies with various departments in the county. One of those being ComCare, CSS, or Community Support Services. We looked at possibly putting the elections office there, and lastly, the Office of the Medical Director. ComCare, CSS, and elections office, during their programming study, came back with needing additional square footage that this facility would not be able to offer them. And when we did the programming study for the Office of Medical Director, it virtually came back almost as a exact match. Their programming need is 6,786 square feet, and the building is currently at 6,778 square feet, so very close. I believe Dr. Gallagher has shared with you the benefits of moving to this location, and so I'd just like to repeat those benefits. This location would put them in compliance with the city-county expectation that they be housed independently of 911 public safety services. This provides them greater access to city and county leadership. It would be a central location for emergency response for Dr. Gallagher, his staff, and those being trained at this facility, and then the accessibility to the simulation center for responders. The CIP request before you is to provide necessary funding authority for the renovation, and that is estimated at $591,223. Of that, $471,917 would be for the construction portion, the demo and the construction portion of the facility, and then the owner's items at $119,306. Owner's items include architectural and engineering fees, FF&E or furniture, fixtures, and equipment, signage at that facility, moving expenses, and then our project contingency. So to pay for this project, it would require a cash transfer from budgeted transfers using budget authority transferred from the operating reserve. Some features of the include include all new efficient interior, including new north AC or HVAC equipment on the north side of the building. We would replace the entire roof, and we would put new windows. There are 32 parking stalls at this location, which is adequate parking for employees, public safety vehicles, and those there for the training of the simulation center. This is a single tenant building, so Office of Medical Director would be the only operations in that building. And we have done a schematic design working with the Office of the Medical Director, so the renovation plans meet their specific needs for their operations. You've seen this before. I presented this, but I thought it was relevant to see it in this presentation. This is the first floor schematic design, and you will see on the north end that's dedicated to the simulation center, with the south end dedicated to the offices for Office of Medical Director. So the employees there, they have a conference room there, recording room, a couple of bathrooms there that could be used during the time that the simulation center is being used. And then let me jump to the second floor. You've seen this again before. This is the basement schematic design. We will not be hardly doing any work in the basement. It will still continue to be used for storage for simulation center equipment and other equipment. There is a break room there. We'll do a little cleanup there in that room. Estimated time to begin the process with Office of Medical Director moving in is about 7 months, so we would look at probably the end of March for them to be in at this location. So that is what I have before you today. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those. Also today here is Scott Hadley, Interim Public Safety Director, who was able to answer any questions as well, and I would recommend your approval.
All right, thank you for that presentation, and I'm just pleased that our Office of Medical Director and our property folks can come up with a good solution for a building that we own that I think needs to be utilized, and this seems like an efficient, cost-effective way to satisfy those demands of using our space and getting our folks in a location that's very convenient, and it makes logical sense for them to be downtown. So, Commissioner O'Donnell.
Thank you. Tanya, I just wanted to thank you for making this a priority. I know you and Assistant Manager Stoltz have been working on this for a while now, and given their current situation in the basement of that fire station, I think this has been necessary for a long time. So I'm real excited for that office and the employees that they'll actually be able to see some daylight and not be in a leaky basement. So I'm excited for this project.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Dennis?
I echo Commissioner O'Donnell's comments. He and I toured the existing facility, saw it firsthand, and we are very pleased that we're moving ahead with this facility. So I'd like to make a motion that we approve the amendment to the CIP.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, call a vote.
Commissioner Dennis.
Aye.
Commissioner Howell.
Aye.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Aye.
Chairman Unruh.
Aye.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Commissioners.
Tanya. Next item.
Item K, presentation of the quarterly financial report.
Good morning, Commissioners. Rick Durham, your Deputy Chief Financial Officer. And at the end of each quarter, the Division of Finance reports on Sedgwick County's financial condition. The following quarterly financial report provides an analysis of the first 6 months of the fiscal year in 2017 that ended June 30th. As a reminder, the information contained in this report is based on unaudited financial statements and excludes any adjustments that may be required by the auditors at a later date. The first section of your report outlines financial information on a budgetary basis for applicable fund types, including comparisons of financial activities with previous fiscal year and the adopted and revised budgets. The second section of the report outlines the financial status of active capital projects. And the final section is the fund statements, which provide a broad overview of the finances in a manner similar to a private sector business based on GAAP standards. Again, I'm just the guy that gets to stand up here and present the numbers. The hard work is done by the staffs of the accounting department led by Hope Hernandez, and then represented by Marty and Brandy are here, and then also the staff of the budget department led by Lorian Showalter-Airy, and they're represented by Carly Sanchez and Todd Kawawa. So all the hard work is done by those folks. I'm just the guy that gets to stand up here and present it. So when we report financial status, the county aggregates information into one of several possible groupings. The general fund, property tax supported funds, other operating funds, or all operating funds. And what this chart shows is broken down by those fund types, and these are projections to the end of the year as of June 30th. So we begin with the general fund. That's the county's primary operating fund, and it accounts for county services that do not have a designated fund of their own. And that includes general government, law enforcement functions, and it receives the broadest variety of revenues. Currently, the operation of 42 divisions are funded from the general fund. So as you can see from this chart, revenues are projected to exceed expenditures, and that results in a change in fund balance of $956,000 that would result in an ending fund balance of $63.5 million. So as we move to the right and go to the other columns here, the county has 7 other property tax supported funds that include bond and interest, EMS, ComCare, aging, highway, noxious weeds, and Wichita State. Each fund provides services related to a specific function, and the property taxes levied in each of those funds are used only to support those specific functions. So the next column then is debt service. I called it bond and interest before, but it's the same. So those expenditures are projected to be more than revenues, but then there are net transfers. So there's a projected change in fund balance of $228,400 that results in an ending fund balance of $3 million. The next column is those other tax supported funds. And so as you can see here, we have a projected net change in fund balance of about $3.8 million, which would result in an ending fund balance of almost $4.2 million. As we move to the right, then we hit the non-property tax funds. The county has 31 budgeted other operating funds which are not supported directly with property taxes. That includes grant funds, enterprise funds, and internal service funds. The non-property tax supported funds are estimated to decrease by approximately $1.5 million in combined fund balance and results in an ending fund balance of $29.4 million. The next column is the Fire District. Sedgwick County Fire District 1 is a distinct governmental entity that is operated as part of Sedgwick County government and levies property taxes, but it is reported separately financially. The projected change in fund balance of $457,000 results in an ending fund balance in the Fire District of $4.4 million. So when we reference operating funds, this means property tax supported funds plus the other operating funds. So as we move to the far right column here and we look at total operating fund of the county, is projected to have an ending fund balance of $138.9 million. So we begin to look at property tax supported funds. So for the second quarter, net revenues were $181.2 million. We saw increases in property tax of $3.8 million and licenses and permits of $5.5 million from MABCD, and I'll go into the details of those in some subsequent slides. End of second quarter expenditures totaled $121.1 million, and the bulk of those increases were in contractuals and commodities, and that's due to the increased use of shopping carts in the way that purchases are accounted for in our system. So this just shows the percentage changes in both the expenditures and revenues. So we saw a 5.9% increase in revenues and a 6% increase in expenditures. This slide shows the net change in those. So we see the increase in county property tax supported funds through June 30th over the same quarter of 2016 of $7.6 million. So now I'll move into some of the details. Shown here are some of the key revenue of the county property tax supported funds. In the past, this has been the top 10 revenues. So this now is key revenues because I actually have 12 listed here. And I want to point out a couple of the changes as we move down that chart and the reason why. So just starting at the top, if we look at property taxes increased by $3.8 million, and that's a 3.1% increase. There were also increases in sales and use taxes, slight decreases in motor vehicle taxes. So the next line where I want to do is look at the line that says licenses and permits. So if you notice, that literally is a 27,000% increase in licenses and permits. And what that is that's MABCD revenue that we didn't realize in 2016 that we're realizing now in 2017. So as we move down the chart, there are some small changes that aren't really significant, but the next change I want to point out is the addition of not the next to the bottom line, but nearly the line officer fees. And the reason I want to point this out is we're seeing there's a 31% increase in officer fees, which offsets the decrease in our mortgage registration fees. So we've talked about this in the past, so I want to show this. And the point is I made that this is no longer a top 10 revenues is because mortgage revenue fees was always in the top 10. But if we look at this list now, mortgage revenue or mortgage registration fees would not be in that top 10. So I wanted to point that out so you can see the offset and how that's going. Sticking with key expenditures in the county property tax supported funds, as I say each quarter, personnel is the largest single category of expense that we incur here at the county. And you see there's a 5.1% increase on that top line that's attributed to target pay adjustments and the pay pool. And you saw that last quarter as well. Of other significant note would be the decrease in pension contributions, and this is as a result of action taken by CAPERS. The increase in I guess I have a red number there. It's 3.4. That's my mistake. That should be black. That should be an increase of 3.4% of FICA, and that would obviously correspond with the increase in salaries. The 13.8% reduction in overtime, and so that's obviously a positive trend. Listed here are some of the other additional non-personnel expenditures that we have in tax-supported funds. Grant awards, increase of 4.9%. There are fleet management charges of 4.3%. And if you may recall from the presentation from the first quarter, these are the same trends that we saw and reported, so it's just some residual from the carryover from the first quarter. So now we shift focus to non-tax special revenue funds. And as I stated, the county has 31 operating funds which are not supported directly with tax. So in these non-tax special revenue funds, you see that revenues are down in the second quarter and the majority of this decrease can be attributed to the Affordable Airfares Program, and you're going to see that in a chart as I move forward. In expenditures, we see a slight increase, but virtually flat. So this shows a year over year. So you can see that large decrease in our revenue, 15.3%, and a slight increase of 0.7% in our expenditures. So this one truly is a top 10 chart of our revenues in the non-tax special revenue funds. So as you roll down that chart in the far right, you'll see a significant amount of red or losses in revenues. Again, the next to the bottom line there is the bulk of that. That's the affordable airfares. You see that last year we had revenue of nearly $4.5 million, and this year it's in virtually zero. That's because that program has gone away. Here are key expenditures in the non-tax special revenue funds. Once again, we see the largest expenditure is people. There are large percentage increases in grant awards and management services, and this is due to a Meals on Wheels program in aging. So we move now away from the budgetary statements into what the second part of the quarterly presentation I mentioned earlier, and this is the portion that in your book would be found behind the tab called Fund Statements. And what this chart shows is a clear pattern that shows the first quarter, second quarter as we collect taxes, and then we spend those down in the third and fourth quarter. If you draw your attention to the 2017 portion of this chart, you'll notice that the second quarter number is a little bit larger than it has been in the past at 115, and again that's due to that revenue from MABCD that we've seen. This chart looks very similar to the last chart if you notice, but this is the same data shown differently as a percentage of budgeted expenditures. So the county, as we know, the county has a policy that says that a fund balance policy that states unrestricted general fund balance to be at least 20% of budgeted expenditures. So as you can see, again, the clear pattern as we collect taxes and then spend them down through the year, but we still maintain a level that's above that policy of 20%. We shift gears again, and now we look at the investment portfolio of the county. As represented by this chart, the portfolio itself is the brown bars going across the chart. Then the county's yield is represented by the blue line there, and right now it currently is just below 1%. The benchmark that we measure against right now is at 1.24%, which is a one-year Treasury of federal government Treasury. So you see there's a gap there between our current yield and what our benchmark is. And this is a result of the Fed changing the rate here twice this year. And as we have investments tied up, and when the Fed raises that rate, obviously our benchmark goes up. So we don't take that money out to reinvestment because of penalties and things of that nature. So what you'll see is as we move forward and those investments mature and they're reinvested at a higher rate, that gap will shrink. And right now we have currently 7 investment type vehicles that will mature in 2017 that will allow us to reinvest. So again, based on whether the Fed raises the rate again in another quarter, so we could be chasing that for a while. So I would say that Brandy Bailey, who's present here, she manages our investment portfolio, and I think she does pretty much a fantastic job of keeping up with that. Here we talk about some significant capital projects in the county. And starting at the top with the Reagan building, obviously construction has begun and will be completed at the end of November 17, and that's just the construction piece. The next line there, the LETC, construction is underway and will be completed in early December 2017. Now last quarter there was some confusion about that number in the committed column, that 298, and that truly is $298 committed. Okay. And that's what that's for, is for blueprints. Moving down, we see the construction of the Southeast EMS post. Intrust Bank Arena Entrance C remodel. The construction is underway and scheduled for completion this November. And of course, the interchange at 235 and 54 continues. So now we look at some of the outside influencers, if you will, that impact the county's financial. So these are fiscal stresses that we see, and these are annualized numbers that are from the end of year 2016. So if we look at that, we begin with liquidity, and that's the number of days cash on hand in the general fund that the county has, and that will be 138 days, and that's up from 2015. We look at flexibility, which is the unrestricted fund balance as a percentage of expenditures, and we're at 29%. Again, that's up from the previous 2 years. We also look at property value, and that's the taxable value per capita, and that's up from the previous 2 years also at $64,200. We look at what our per capita debt is, so our debt portfolio as it is per the population of the county, and we see that debt is coming down. It's at $303 per capita. We look at our debt burden, that's a debt service as a percentage of our general fund revenue, and we see it's really fairly constant. It's at 13%. And we then, the last two measures, we look at our property tax rate and our property tax reliance. Again, small changes but fairly flat over the last 3 years. And once again, these are annualized numbers, and these are numbers that you saw last quarter. The next is metrics that we measure as far as short-term trends. We look at the changes, and what this chart shows is a change in the second quarter of 2017, and the net changes from the second quarter in 2016. So what we're looking at as far as those trend numbers is how did these numbers change from the same time period last year. So if we look at those numbers, then home sales is slightly down from the second quarter of 2016. Home permits, new home permits, are up from that same time period in 2016. Mortgages registered down. Sales and use tax down almost to 1%. Total employed numbers are up, and unemployment is down. These are the long-term trends that we look at. Again, annualized numbers that you saw last quarter. And as you can see, growth in our tax base is up home sales is up, new home permits, and again, this is annualized data, up, mortgages registered up, increase in sales and use taxes, and the unemployment rate is at 4%, and that arrow shows up, and what that means is it's a positive trend, not that unemployment is rising. What this chart shows is the leading economic indicators, and this data is taken from the Center for Economic Development and Business Research from Wichita State. And I draw a circle around that last year or so. And if you take your eyes clear to the right, you notice there's a slight dip in the last part of that chart. But even with that slight dip, what that represents is about, as they do leading economic indicators, and that measure, that's about 0.8 on their scale. But even with that slight dip, if you'll draw your eyes back over the length of that chart, you'll notice that if you can follow that line that's there, that line is 96, you see that we're still at a higher point today than we were since 2008. So moving away now, and we just look at some of the potential threats that we see to the county's financial health. Obviously, the federal budget remains, a question mark. State budget, projected deficits there. And then the local economy, while we looked at some of those economic indicators and we looked at some of those things that were positive trends, it's still, we're seeing positive move, but it's slower than it is nationally. Again, key points of the report: Sedgwick County is currently in sound financial condition, and there's no deficit projected in the general fund for this fiscal year. There is increasing reliance on taxes to fund government. Again, the loss of the mortgage registration fee, but as we saw, those officer fees are kind of replacing that, but they're not replacing them 100%. So while revenue grows modestly or is decreasing, our cost of business, either is flat or it continues to increase. So through the second quarter, our performance is consistent with what we expected and projected. Our fundamentals continue to reflect strong financial position. There's no projected deficit in this fiscal year. And again, the county focus is to use a strategic plan as a roadmap for success. That would conclude my presentation. I would be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Well, thank you, Rick. A lot of information. I do have a question, though. We had quite a discussion at the bench on a policy issue about our debt service as a percent of our general fund, I don't know, a couple months ago. And it seems as though we said that debt service budget was going to be at 10% from 9%. And I just wonder, have I got my categories mixed up?
Yes, sir. There are two different, you're talking about two different issues.
Okay.
This is, what I show is the policy that says that we will have 20% fund balance as it ties to our budgeted expenditures. And what you're talking about is what? Ah.
I give you a note.
Thank you. Well, that's debt service of the general fund. So the plus general fund. Okay, sorry.
You want me to?
If was you.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll swap you. Good morning, Commissioners. Lindsay Poruso, your CFO. So in the debt policy that you adopted, the measure that you indicated that we'd have as our limit is 10% of our general fund plus debt service expenditures. Okay. What Rick was showing you as a measure is the general fund revenues only. So it's a measure of actuals as opposed to projected budget, and it's only in that one fund as opposed to the two that we use in our or in your debt policy.
All right, thank you for that clarification. I had a second question is about the sales and use tax, which is a substantial part of our planning, especially in in Public Works, but that 0.9% less that we're receiving, is that cause for alarm at this point?
It seems, if you, in the actual quarterly report, there's a chart, and see if I can put my fingers on that chart, and it gives a history. It's on page 9 of your report. So if you look at that, it gives history back, and it compares January through June and the percent changes. And March, April, and May show decreases in the property tax, or the property tax, pardon me, the sales tax that we receive. Now keep in mind that when we receive that from the state, there's a lag there. So we're not necessarily receiving the sales tax that was collected in January, February, or March. There's a lag. So it doesn't cause a concern for me, because as I look at that, I would anticipate that a lot of retail use goes down in January and February because it's after Christmas. So that's how I would look at that. So as June is actually starting to come back, so that 1%.
All right.
I mean, we'll keep an eye on that.
Too narrow of a time frame to
Yes, sir.
draw a conclusion.
Yes,
All
sir.
right, I got it. Thank you. Commissioner Dennis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Your slides 19, 20, and 21, they do a good job of portraying what Sedgwick County did versus Sedgwick County. I guess my question is, how does Sedgwick County compare to Kansas and to the U.S. economy? And it just doesn't tell me that.
We actually have some information that we used to receive from GFOA that we measured against benchmark counties, and it was counties of like size and like financial size as well, and that reported their financial information in the same manner as we do. It's who had received a GFOA award. We have the last year that we received any information to give benchmark was 2015, and it doesn't seem relevant to measure 2017 information against 2015, so we've been reaching out to them trying to get that, and we just recently received notification from them, and we received it in a manner that wasn't in a spreadsheet to easily do, so we're analyzing that data now.
Okay, well, I'd just be interested in knowing how Sedgwick County is doing against the rest of the state and against the nation.
As would we, and we've been asking them for a couple of fiscal years to give us that data.
Okay,
so,
thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Howell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm looking at slide 13. This may be similar to the question that the chairman asked a minute ago, but I see a lot of red on that chart. There's a lot of the sources of revenue that are significantly less. I guess overall it seems concerning that there's that much of a change. Is that something we need to address with our forecast for revenue? I mean, is this going to continue this way, or is this something that's just explainable that we can assure ourselves there's not a problem there?
Well, obviously the bulk of that, as we're talking about non-tax special revenue funds. So there's a 15.3% reduction. We know that. So we lost the affordable airfares. We know that. But there are a lot of other reductions there in Medicaid fees, revenue from the state, federal revenue, state pass-through grants, federal revenue miscellaneous. Those are the large percentages, which is why I put the comment in there when we look at threats to us. It's the federal revenue, that the loss of that, and also the state. So those are grant-funded revenues that we're looking at. So absolutely there's concern, which is why it's on our radar as a threat to our financial health.
Might be worthwhile to drill in on these and find out what the money had been used for in the past, and find out as our obligation or our commitment to these services or whatever it was we were doing with that money. Are those commitments continuing, or are we reducing what we're doing as a consequence to reduce funding to the county? It'd be good to, I guess, have a deeper understanding of that. that's a little, just overall, that chart just looks a little concerning the way it's presented. I appreciate the explanation.
Yes, sir.
My next question was, I guess, on page 9, slide number 18. Just a comment first. We are doing a lot in Sedgwick County, a lot of things to celebrate. We've got 4 significant milestones happening. We get to cut the ribbon on looks like basically 4 significant projects. I think that's tremendous. We've got all that kind of coming to a head at one point. But I guess one of my takeaways on this chart is I guess I didn't realize we'd committed $14.23 million to the Reagan building overall. Is that, please remind me, again, I know the purchase price was just under $5 million. The refurbishment of floors 1 through 3 is part of this $14.23 million, I assume, and as well as FF&E is part of that as well. Is the bond and interest cost part of this? In other words, all the CIP for the entire building from the very beginning till the very end, all the FF&E for all 6 floors, all remodeling costs for all 6 floors, all the interest costs. Is all that built into this now?
Yes, and the 14.23 that you reference is the budget number, not the committed number.
Yeah, I understand. I understand, but I guess, okay. So we've committed 8.59, but the budget is, that's things that have been, that's approved spending, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So it's likely we'll still spend most of that money, the difference there. Okay. But I understand this is including everything, including like the interest on the bonds and everything.
That's correct.
Okay. It's just collectively, I guess I didn't realize it had gotten that high. But that's just a small takeaway. I guess my final comment would be that on page 13, slide 25, you make a comment. There's no deficit projected for fiscal year 2017. But I guess I would say that's reference to the approved budget. In other words, our real numbers, our performance is positive compared to what we passed as a budget, but we had planned some deficit spending. So relevant to that, we're doing better than we're spending less than we thought we'd spend, or what was approved in 2017 budget. Is that correct?
That's correct.
But this still does include some deficit spending that was planned.
Yes, but what I'm basing that statement on is the chart on page 7 of this.
Okay.
So if you'll reference that on page 7, that is in reference directly to the general fund. So that's the first column. So if you look at the general fund, there's an actual beginning fund balance of $62.5 million. Then we have revenues and expenditures, transfers. So the net change in fund balance on this is projected at a positive 961,000. So the ending fund balance is 63.5. That's what I reference when there's no deficit there.
Okay. All right. Thank you for the explanation again. That's all my questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner. I don't see any questions. Can we get a motion to receive and file?
Mr. Chair, I move that we receive and file the quarterly report.
Second.
Thank you. Motion and a second. Madam Clerk, call a vote.
Commissioner Dennis.
Aye.
Commissioner Howell.
Aye.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Aye.
Chairman Unruh.
Aye. Thank you, Rick.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Appreciate it. And thanks to all your staff that helped put this together. Next item, please.
Item L, report of the Board of Bids and Contracts regular meeting on August 10th, 2017.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Joe Thomas, Purchasing Director. The meeting of the Board of Bids and Contracts that was held on August the 10th results in one item that we're bringing to for your approval this morning. The item is the color production copier for the Division of Information Technology and Support Services, and this recommendation is to accept the low overall responsive bid from Canon Solutions America Incorporated, and this will be at a monthly lease rate of $889. This will also include the click charges at the rates listed and an extended service rate of $150 per hour, and this is for a period of 60 months. So our recommendation is to approve the item, and I'll be happy to try to answer any questions you may have.
I think we do have a comment from Commissioner O'Donnell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Thomas, I noticed that Treasurer Kazire actually voted against it. Did we look at buying the machine and then asking what a monthly service cost would be on top of that?
That analysis was performed, and if Ms. Meyerhoff would like to share the details of that, we'll call her forward.
Mm-hmm.
We are aware that it would be slightly less to buy the machine. However, the service contract is not as strong when you purchase a machine as when you opposed to leasing. Also, these are high-use machines, and sometimes they need to be replaced. We replaced the other copier in the print shop last year. If we were to purchase the machine, we would have to buy another one as opposed to just getting to switch it out under the same lease terms.
The warranty wouldn't cover it if it broke?
It's not going to be that long term of a warranty.
What warranties are available?
We would have to talk to the vendor.
You guys didn't ask the vendor what warranties were available?
It would be in the contract.
It
wouldn't be the full term of the lease. It wouldn't be a 6-year warranty like a 6-year lease would be.
Right. Do they sell long-term warranties?
We do not know.
Really? Mr. Chair, I think we need to postpone this until we get that answer to see if warranties are available or not. I think that's pretty basic, and it was brought up at the meeting, and nobody followed up with it apparently. And thank you, Ms. Meyerhoff. Thank you, Ms. Thomas. But Mr. Chair, I would move that we postpone this until we get some answers on a warranty.
All right, thank you for the motion. Is there a second? I would second the motion on the stipulation that this is not a time-sensitive issue. Is that, I mean, we could get some more information in a week and
yes, sir.
Bring
we
this
will.
back to us?
Yes, sir.
All right, then I'll second the motion. Is there any other comment or question? Commissioner Howell.
This is more of a comment about some numbers in this backup material. I'm just a little surprised. And it says in 2016 there were 254,000 black and white clicks and 775,000 color clicks. Is there some type of a base number that's is there like some kind of a threshold that starts counting but when you exceed some kind of a number or we're doing essentially 3 times more color copies than we are black and white? 29 cents a piece.
Those are just the clicks for the color copier.
I understand, but roughly 250,000 black and white and 750,000 color. It's about a 3-to-1 ratio for color. Am I seeing that correctly? And I'm seeing about 29 cents per color copy. There's just more of a
75%.
There's 254,000 black and white.
Right, that's 250,000. And 775,000 color.
Okay.
That's over 3/4. That's over 3/4 of a million.
I'm sorry, Commissioner. Can you repeat what your question is for me?
Well, I'm just looking at the backup material on the page where it describes what the discussion and all of that. It says this is backup material. It says last paragraph, the third paragraph on the page. It says in 2016 there were 254,000 black and white clicks and 775,000 color clicks. So if I'm reading that correctly, we're saying about 75% of our copying on this machine is going to be color.
Yes.
And those are 29 cents per copy.
Yes.
I guess we may have some other things to talk about. I guess I'm surprised we're doing that much color, and I'd like to know if this is the, again, if we're doing that much color, I'm not sure this is the, I guess maybe this is the right machine, but I'm wondering why we're doing so much color. That's a different question perhaps, but I guess I'm not ready to bless the purchase just yet. I'd like to know more about this. This is really kind of new information for me, and I don't know as much about this as I would like.
The color copying is based on the department's requests, and we did start charging back departments for those color clicks. It used to be that just came out of the print shop budget, but now departments are responsible for that, and it comes out of their budget, so it is controlled now.
I understand. I understand that. I guess it's just a little surprising. I think for many organizations, they would not want to see that much money spent on color copies, unless there's some kind of a chart that needs color to be clear to the reader or whatever. We ought to try to minimize how much color we're using, but That's a lot of money to be used on color copies, I guess. And this machine obviously is designed to do that.
Yes, this is a
So
production.
if we're going to continue doing that type of usage, then maybe this is the right machine. But I'm a little surprised that we're doing that. So I guess I'd like to think about this for a bit. So I would be willing to support the motion to delay. I don't think there's any reason to rush at this necessarily. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner O'Donnell?
One other question, and I don't know if this is for Ms. Meyerhoff or Mr. Thomas, but the DPI that didn't meet your criteria from it'd be the Sharp MX machine. What is the DPI on that? I've been looking for that and did not see it.
On the machine that we're purchasing, it is 2400 by 2400.
Right, yeah. But on the Sharp MX machine, that would have been, as far as responsive bids, would have come in twice, but just not meeting the criteria of the 2400 by 2400 DPI. Do you know what the DPI is on that Sharp MX machine?
I just checked with our buyer. She believes it was 1200 by 1200 DPI,
Okay.
half that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Commissioners, any other comment? We have a motion to defer. Seeing no comment, Madam Clerk, please call the vote.
Commissioner Dennis.
Aye.
Commissioner Howell.
Aye.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Aye.
Chairman Unruh.
Aye.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Joe, thank you. Next item.
Consent agenda.
Commissioners, Mike Skulls, County Manager. Recommend you approve consent agenda items Mike through Alpha Echo.
What's the will of the board?
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Madam Clerk, call a vote.
Commissioner Dennis.
Aye.
Commissioner Howell.
Aye.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Aye.
Chairman Unruh.
Aye. And next item,
Legislative issues.
I don't think we have anything to talk about there. And I know we have an executive session coming up, but before that, now's the time, I guess, to talk to other commissioners. Do you have any other information you'd like to present now? Commissioner Howell.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was going to take a point of personal privilege this morning. For the Howell family, for myself and my wife, this is a huge week this week. We had our first grandchild. And everybody likes babies, so I thought I'd just take less than 1 minute to just brag on my family. This is a beautiful little girl. Her name is Jane Esther, and she was born on Monday afternoon this last week. And we are now finally grandparents. We have 5 wonderful kids. My wife and I have been married 27 years, and I love my family. But this is a huge milestone for our family to have our first grandchild, and we're just celebrating that and wanted to share that with the public. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner. Anyone else want to make a comment on anything? I would like to say that yesterday afternoon visited with several other folks and some city council people and the board of Wichita Area Technical College as we cut the ribbon on the Future Maker Mobile STEM Lab, which has received some publicity here lately, but it's a pretty amazing piece of equipment. We can go around and allow grade school folks to see what it's like to be a welder, or, if you can believe it, be a heart surgeon. They have a 3D, I don't know all the technical words, but you can, I took a heart there and cut it half in two and messed around with the valves and put it back, and all you gotta do is put on these little glasses and hold this little pin, and you can really learn a lot about a heart. I also did some welding. I used to be a pretty good welder, not so good right now. And but a lot of different technical things that will give individuals, young people, a chance to see what that's like, hopefully interest them in that type of a career. And it's quite a mobile lab. It's a big fifth wheel type trailer, goes on the back of a big 3/4 ton truck, and they go around to different schools and give people the opportunity to try out the trade. And I think someone from the Wall Street Journal was here, I'm told, and they wanted to take it back to New York and demonstrate it, but that wasn't feasible, so that we didn't do that. So anyway, just want to congratulate Gail Getz and Sherry Utash in pushing forward that idea and getting the funding for it, and it's pretty impressive. Second thing I'd like to say is that I attended with Commissioner Dennis a preview of the Hunter Health Clinic here on East Central, and it's been an organization around for quite some time, and I really wasn't aware that they serve over 13,000 clients in that organization. They're building a new 22,000 square foot clinic to serve folks who need that clinical services and who have circumstances in life that don't allow them to go to a regular clinic. And they're focused on the Indian population is how they got started, Native Americans. But we found out that they have optical services and dental services, which I wasn't aware of, and a pharmacy. And it's really pretty impressive. It's going to be a very improved asset in our community. So just want to congratulate those folks. And I think Commissioner Dennis would agree that it was eye-opening with the services that they offer.
I agree.
And so does Commissioner O'Donnell. So anyway, we're pleased to congratulate them on their progress this far. But with that, Commissioners, I don't see anyone else asking to speak, so we have a need for an executive session.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I was able to attend after. I think I saw Commissioner Dennis in the parking lot yesterday when I was walking in. It was an impressive facility. Well, it will be.
Will be.
And it's definitely going to shine up the corner of Central and Grove. Yep. It'll be spectacular. But, Mr. Chair, I move that the Board of County Commissioners recess into executive session for 30 minutes to consult with an attorney, which would be deemed privileged in the attorney-client relationship. It's required to protect attorney-client privilege, and that the Board of County Commissioners return to this room from executive session no sooner than 11:13.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, call the vote.
Commissioner Dennis?
Aye.
Commissioner Howell?
Aye.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
Aye.
Chairman Unruh.
Aye. We are recessed to executive session. And Mr. Manager?
Between the thin red line, the thin blue line, and the thin white line lies the thin gold line. This narrowest of lines represents those who are rarely seen, but always heard and appreciated. The calm voice in the dark, the heroes behind the scenes, the golden glue that holds it all together. 911 dispatchers.
Sedgwick County 911, what is your emergency?
The 911 dispatcher is essential. When I'm en route to a call, they're continuously giving us updates, so I know what's going on before I get to the call. And then when I arrive at the call, sometimes I'm the only person, so they're my eyes and ears when I can't be.
One thing that drew me in the most is I love helping people, and then I started and realized that I love how much we help people, and the excitement every day is different.
911 dispatchers are extremely important to Sedgwick County Fire Department. They're the first ones on scene. They're the ones that have the first contact with our citizens that are having this emergency. They are the ones who notify what units need to go to a particular emergency. They're the ones who tell us how many units need to go. They are a vital success to the outcome of all the calls that we run. We couldn't do that job without them.
I really wanted to be that person after you go through something really traumatic and you have to call 911 and then you finally get that calm voice and you're like, okay, it's going to be okay.
Hectic, but very rewarding, because you never know what's going to happen on that next phone call, whether you're going to be saving a life.
My favorite part about the job is the adrenaline. I love the fast pace when things are getting busy, when we're getting chases, or when we're, really helping someone that I know needs the help.
If you're interested in being the first responder, email workfor911@sedgwick.gov or call 660-4977 for more information.
Wichita was built on a floodplain. Early settlers even called the area from hillside to ridge road swampland. In the 1800s, several large floods hit the area. But it wasn't until after the 1944 flood that left more than 5,000 temporarily homeless, the city started a flood control committee. That's where MS Mitch Mitchell, or Big Ditch Mitch, comes into the story. After just 10 days on the job as an office engineer, he was sent out into the field.
They made me wade through about 1.5 feet of water. Now, I'm in my office dress and shoes, and they made me wade through the water to get to the road where the drive was.
And what started out as a 6-week commitment to the project led to a lifelong career with the City-County Flood Control Office.
A lot of planning went into how many of those local flooding systems can be incorporated in that particular project, and the floodway was the only way to do it.
But convincing everyone it was a good idea was another story.
There was a tremendous amount of objection to the acquisition of right-of-way. For that, we don't have any flooding up here, and you're ruining my field, and you're cutting off the highway, and all of those things, that they did not recognize the importance of that diversion.
The design for the Wichita Valley Center floodway was modeled after one Mitchell saw in California.
They were very helpful. They sent us their manuals for construction of the lining, for the maintenance of the lining, how these things should be under drain systems. So they gave us the design work for what you see on the paved canal now. The main project was the diversion of the Little Arkansas River, some water from the Chisholm Creek system, and some water from the Arkansas River through what became known as the Big Ditch. There were people who said, you can't do that. You can't put that Little River water in the Big River. Well, we did.
And that Big Ditch has been his legacy. Tony Giuliano is the art director for Sedgwick County. You've probably seen his work. But when he's not designing for the county, he's got his whistle on the soccer pitch.
He looked at me and he said, "You're skinny, you're young, you can run, you should ref soccer." And 15 years later, I'm still doing it.
Moving up the ranks.
And it's opened up a lot of doors for me. I refed at the local level and the JUCO and the NAI levels all the way up to Division I.
Achieving a collegiate level national badge.
It's exhilarating. I really enjoy that challenge. I mean, at that level, you're reffing the best athletes.
Reffing around 60 matches a year.
You'll find a common phrase in the referee community. It's for the love of the game. Soccer, to a lot of us, is a big part of our lives, whether played it, watch it, or referee it, or all three. And it's given back to the game.
Something that helps ease the stress of his day job.
It just allows me to challenge or to accept and really take on any challenge. And a stressful environment at work, it kind of is easy after running 6 to 8 miles in a match and getting yelled at from everybody.
Crediting Sedgwick County for allowing him to pursue both of his passions.
It's a neat honor. I've gotten to travel to do some really high-level games, work with referees across the United States. It's just been a very rewarding second career, if you will.
If you've ever needed a snack while visiting the Sedgwick County Courthouse, you've probably seen Wes Brummer. He and his wife Debbie run the Snack Zone. Brummer also furnishes all the vending machines in the county. But when he's not keeping us fed, he spends his time writing historical fiction.
I grew up in a family that liked to tell stories. My folks grew up during the Depression.
That's part of what inspired his book, Dust and Roses.
It's basically about a young woman who takes a big fall, and the rest of the story is her redeeming herself.
Writing hasn't come without challenges. Brummer was born with severe low vision.
Describing color, that was probably one of my weaknesses in the story. I didn't put enough color description.
But that's never stopped him. He sold about 150 copies of Dust and Roses, which can be found in the Snack Zone or on Amazon. And he's working on his second book.
My character is a German prisoner of war that finds himself in Camp Concordia.
He hopes to have it complete by summer of 2018. Habitat for Humanity provides opportunities for families to achieve affordable home ownership.
The volunteers, we don't have the hands to reach out to recruit the families. We don't have the hands to go and meet with these families and help them along their journey.
One of those volunteers is Sedgwick County employee Greg Gann.
Next thing you know, I'm on 3 committees, and here it is 10 plus years later, and it's just a great fit for me.
Gann serves on the Home Buyers Committee, reviewing applicants and doing on-site home visits.
He is always enthusiastic and excited to introduce families, to tell their story, and to talk about not only the challenges that they face, but how they overcame those challenges.
You realize just how difficult it is for families to find clean, safe, affordable housing in good neighborhoods where they can raise their family without much care. These houses are filled with love. It doesn't matter if you don't know which end of a hammer to use. We'll find something that fits your ability and you can participate.
Having volunteers like Greg who are committed, who are willing to give of their time, their talent, their treasure, we can't ask for anything more. It's truly a blessing.
Wow, every day is a great day. I come to the job sites, we go on home visits, we meet. I can't think of a bad day, not once. It's truly been life-changing for me.
If you're hurt, you want help to come fast. That's where these bikes come in.
We're able to fit into places the ambulance can't.
The Sedgwick County EMS bike team was started in 2009 with the help of grants and community donations. Crew members must try out to be part of the team.
I love coming down here to Riverfest and helping out. I love biking, so it's just kind of combining 2 of my loves together.
Then they work in 2-person crews. Additional support is provided with this. It's how patients are transported out of the crowd after the bike team provides treatment. It's also proven to be faster and more cost-effective.
Our response times are 1/10 of what they used to be down here, and we're using 75% less personnel to get the job done.
And provides a great opportunity for the public.
Just being able to interact with the community, I think, is pretty awesome. They could have come up and asked us a lot more questions. We're a little bit more accessible than we are in the ambulances usually, so we get to see a lot more of the people and hang out with the kids.
Lake Afton. More than 720 acres of fun. All within a 20-minute drive from Wichita. Join us as we take a look inside the park.
I think the biggest draw for this lake is its proximity to Wichita and the big city. It's close, it's convenient.
There's something for everyone. Boating, swimming, water skiing, fishing, camping, looking at the stars, and much more. Tom Ames has been coming out to the lake for 10 years. This flying field on the west side of the lake is open to the public for sport and hobby flying.
This is one of the very best places to fly in the whole state, actually. Lots of open space, real nice runway. It's just a great facility for us. We really appreciate being able to come out here.
Maybe you're looking for the catch of the day.
Bread and butter fish for Lake Atherton is, of course, the catfish. The largest catfish that I'm aware of that's been caught out of here weighed 86 pounds back in the late 80s.
Or just a little peace and quiet.
Clear night, you can see and hear everything. You see all the lanterns, you can hear people talking. It's just an amazing sight to see.
And the excitement continues.
It's been a popular spot for people to attend and visit as it continues today.
Celebrating 75 years of fun in the sun.
I think this lake is cemented in its time frame. It's going to be here for many, many more years to come.
As we were going through the records, we discovered some very interesting things.
The role of the Register of Deeds office is to file and store all real estate documents.
Basically, it's ownership of land, and it's very important, and it started in the 1800s.
But that wasn't always the case. Like this depiction of God, or these instructions to make a wig.
I think some people just wanted to file them here because it was an opportunity to have it filed officially somewhere. And maybe this for them was the most convenient place.
But it's the history that's the most interesting. These are the first plats of land for Wichita.
So this is what the city looked like when it was brand new in 1870.
And the history that made Wichita the air capital of the world. Deeds to the Travel Air Company, started by Beech, Stearman, and Cessna.
So these aircraft companies go back a long way. These all started in the 1920s.
There's even a local connection to former President Obama. His grandparents and other family members lived in Wichita in the 60s.
His grandparents moved from Wichita in the 1960s to go to Hawaii, where they helped his mother raise him.
And then there's the Wild West. This deed is from Billy the Kid's mother, who ran a company washing soldiers' clothes.
She also dabbled in real estate. So there's several deeds where she's granting property and also where she bought her own property.
Billy the Kid also lived with his mother here in Wichita.
These documents are so important and they're so unique that we want to preserve them. This is just the tip of the iceberg. We have more. We have lots more.
Jim needs to. Okay, we are back from executive session, and so I would like to call the Board of County Commissioners back to order and say that in executive session, no binding action was taken, but Mr. Counselor, do we have business to take care of?
We have an off-agenda item, Mr. Chairman, and Mr. North of my office is here to present that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Michael North, Assistant County Counselor. I'm here today asking for authorization by way of a motion from the Commission to settle a personal injury claim against the county. This involves a motor vehicle accident. The motor vehicle accident occurred on March 14, 2016. A public works vehicle collided with a vehicle driven by a mother and her two children. In this case, the parent's car was rear-ended by our county vehicle. We believe that there is clear liability on the part of the county. That happens when you drive as much as county employees are required to do in the course of their duties. We believe liability is clear. There were some injuries, not minor but not major injuries to the children. We will not name the children because this is not a filed lawsuit. In my practices, I will not name minor children unless there is a filed pleading and that they are named in them, and that has not been the case here. This is simply a claim that's been filed on the county, but my recommendation is that the sum of $20,000 be paid for the younger of the two children that was injured in this motor vehicle accident, and the sum of $23,000 for the older of these two children. That would be a total of $43,000. I would ask that a motion be adopted to that effect, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, before we hear a motion, Mr. Counselor, do you have a comment?
Mr. Chairman, I think it's up to you, but I think maybe we need to have a vote of the Commission to take up an off-agenda item before we then take up the item itself. I don't know what the tradition has been, but, you know, it's up to you.
I think that's been our tradition, but it sounds like a perfectly reasonable thing to do. So, Commissioners, could we have a motion to take up an off-agenda item relating to legal issues?
I move that we take up an off-agenda item related to legal issues, Mr. Chair.
Second. Thank you. Madam Clerk, call a vote, please.
Commissioner Dennis.
Aye.
Commissioner Howell.
Aye.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Aye.
Chairman Unruh.
Aye. And we've heard the presentation, Commissioners, and we've heard the recommendation. What's the will of the Board?
Move to approve the recommendation presented by Council.
Second. Thank you. Is there any discussion of the motion? Hearing none, Madam Clerk, call a vote, please.
Commissioner Dennis.
Aye.
Commissioner Howell.
Aye.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Aye.
Chairman Unruh.
Aye. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, sir.
Is there any other business to come before us? All right, seeing none then, we are adjourned.
Production and broadcast costs for Sedgwick County Commission meetings have been underwritten by